Hey guys, and welcome once again to Smite Tactics. My name is Jaggerous, and today we're doing something a little bit different, as instead of a deck guide, we're going to be discussing the merits of a bunch of cards as we open some packs. I have 25 packs here to open, which equates to 125 cards. That's quite a lot of cards. So we're going to open some packs. We're going to talk about the cards that we find in those packs and the strengths and weaknesses of those cards. And a lot of those cards, 15 of those packs actually, I got from the Smite Tactics Founders Pack. So if you don't know already, the Smite Tactics Founders Pack is available to purchase for $20, though it is on sale, or it was when it came out, for 25% off. So you can find it for $15 occasionally. Keep an eye out if you don't want to spend 20. And this gives you access to the Smite Tactics beta. So if you don't have access and you want to play, you can buy into the beta rather than waiting for keys. Although there are still keys being sent out, you don't have to buy the Founders Pack to get access. On top of that, it gives you 15 packs. So of these packs that I have, 15 were from the Founders Pack. You get 3 new legendary leaders, Isis, Freya, Poseidon. You get the legendary card Enyo. You get a card back, you see here, and an icon, this beta tester icon. As well as some stuff in Smite. I think you get a skin for Bellona, for example. Anyhow, so I think what we'll start by doing is looking at these new leaders and comparing them to the old leaders. So Ra is your original starter Egyptian leader, and Isis is the replacement, or your alternative, I guess. You can see that they're both ranged, and they both have 1 damage, 18 health, 2 movement. So in terms of behavior as a unit, they behave identically. They can attack, you know, from the same distance. It's range. They have the same health. They have the same movement. But what differences here is their ability. Ra's ability, spend 2 mana to restore 1 health to all friendlies in a target area. This is actually a 2x2 area, so you can spend 1 health, and basically all friendlies in an area will gain 1 health. Whereas Isis, her ability is spend 2 mana to silence a god until your next turn. So, what do we think about these different abilities? Well, personally, I prefer Isis's ability. And the reason for this is Ra, generally, you know, you require 4 units grouped together to get the maximum heal. Because it does a 2x2 area. So the maximum heal you can get is 1 health to 4 units. And generally with Ra, you're not looking to play a very unit-heavy comp. Ra is more about control. It's more about keeping the board clear until the later game when you have some very strong cards. Right? Well, Egypt, sorry, is about that. Not necessarily Ra, but the Egyptian pantheon, they have a lot of control cards. Whereas Isis, the ability to silence a god, which stops it from using its ability, could be, you know, much more useful in a control setting. So instead of doing your attack, you can silence, and instead of doing your attack, you can heal. I'm more prone to Isis because I think the silence is more useful. Next, we have Poseidon versus Zeus. So Zeus is your starter leader for the Greek pantheon? Oh, I can't even words today. Anyway, he is a 118 ranged unit, and his ability is spend 2 mana to draw a card. Then we have Poseidon, who is a 120 melee unit, and he has 3 mobility, whereas Poseidon has 2. His ability, you spend 2 mana, you deal 1 damage in a target area, and on your next turn, it then deals an additional damage. So kind of like the fire rocks on the floor of the Norse pantheon, you know, when you leave a unit standing on them, they take damage. It's kind of like that. And I actually favor Zeus, personally. I think that, you know, if you have spare mana and nothing to attack, drawing a card can be much more useful than just dealing this area damage. I mean, the other thing is Poseidon is melee, and I think melee units are at a general disadvantage to ranged units. I think there are going to be decks and strategies where, you know, having a melee Poseidon and that extra mobility and the AoE will be useful, but in general, I'm more favoring towards Zeus. Like, I'm more likely to run a Zeus Greek deck than I am a Poseidon Greek deck, for example. And then we have our Norse pantheon, and here we have Odin versus Freya. So Odin is your starter leader, and Freya is the one we got in the Founders Pack. So Odin, and you can actually get Freya and Poseidon and all that, by the way, in packs. You know, you don't have to get them through the Founders Pack. You can just find them in packs. So Odin, spend 2 mana and give a friendly +1/+1 until your next turn. So he's a 120, 3 mobility, melee. And she's a 123 mobility melee as well. So the difference here is just your abilities. Alternatively, you can spend 2 mana to banish a non-leader enemy until your next turn. And Odin and Freya, I think, are actually fairly on par. It really depends what you want to do with your deck. Like, a lot of decks, they like to kind of rush. So they're kind of designed to Norse decks are designed to try and kill someone in the first, few turns, in which case the ability to +1/+1 may be more useful than the ability to banish, because you don't really want to banish units if you're trying to kill everything, if you're trying to deal a lot of damage. Saying that, banish is a really useful, it's a really useful ability. Basically what banish does is it stops an enemy from doing anything until their next turn, so they miss a turn with that unit, but on the flip side, you can't attack that unit. So the unit becomes untargetable. And yeah, this one, again, it comes down to personal preference. I think they're both useful. Next, we have Enyo. So let's go find Enyo. She's in here somewhere. This is the other legendary card you get. And I actually think Enyo is a really good legendary. I think she fits really nicely in the god-centric Greek deck. So she has initiative, which means that her ability she can use on the start of her turn. She's a 5/5 with 3 mobility. And her ability is that she places a 0/4 flag, so you drop down a flag, and then you can actually deploy units next to the flag rather than next to your god. So it gives you kind of more options in how you want to position your summons as you summon them. And because, Greek is a very summon-centric deck, you've got a lot of gods and units that you're going to be playing, this flag can actually be really useful. And it's usable on the turn Enyo is summoned. So if you're getting towards the late game, when you have more mana, you could drop down Enyo, drop down a flag, and then summon another unit next to that flag. And that also saves you then moving your leader to be able to position units there, which is really useful, I would say, for Zeus, because sometimes you have to move Zeus in to summon units next to your opponent, and you don't necessarily want to do that. You want to kind of keep him at range, because he's ranged. So Enyo fits really nicely in there. So those are the cards that you get from the Founders Pack. Now let's start opening some packs. Okay, so here goes. Oop, a little bit of an animation thing there. So if you mouse over the cards, I think they glow, depending on which is which. Are they going to glow? I swear they used to have a glow. Maybe they don't anymore. Oh well, we'll start opening cards. Rod of Tahuti. Give a friendly god +2 ability damage. Egyptian. This card I don't rate that highly, just because at the moment Egyptian is very control focused. So it's all about clearing the board and then summoning a bunch of late game stuff. So this card, I mean, if you're doing a monster centric or minion centric or god centric, well, god centric I guess because it's ability damage deck, Rod of Tahuti can be quite good. It gives a friendly god +2 ability damage, so the gods that do have damage, that's going to be quite good. It maybe synergizes quite well with Anubis, for example, but it's not the greatest Egyptian card. Pardon gives a friendly pardon. So pardon means that if you hit, you don't get hit back. This is a pretty strong trait, especially put on some stronger cards. It's a decent card. That's a neutral card. That's more or less what I got to say. It's decent. And we have Geb, who is a blue rarity, so he is so he's rarer than these. These are commons. I think he's uncommon. Then you have rare and legendary. So this is uncommon. Give a friendly +0/+3 and remove all crowd control effects from them. So I'm wondering if Rod of Tahuti on Geb would make that a +2/+3 because it gives him +2 ability damage, but his ability does no damage. So does that? I don't know. I've not actually tried that synergy, but Geb is basically about, buffing the health of units, and removing crowd control can be very useful. The thing with Geb though is, again, Egyptian is very clear focused and control focused at the moment, so Geb doesn't really come into play that often in that sort of deck. But if you're doing a more god focused deck, I'm sure that you could find a home for him. We have Sanctuary, make a friendly unit immune to damage until your next turn. So Sanctuary is basically, I've summoned a unit and I really don't want you to kill it. So this is actually a Greek counter to these clear strategies. You can actually use Sanctuary up against these Egyptian control decks and summon a god and then make it immune. And that means that, the Egyptians can't immediately clear it, which is quite useful. However, the Egyptians do have a card which lets them possess or take control of one of your gods. So if you use Sanctuary, I don't know if they could still possess it. I think they probably could, so they could just steal that card away. But it does give you, counter to stuff like Execute and Last Breath and what have you. And then we have RG's Minion, Ranged Divinity. Divinity, draw a card. So he's a ranged unit, 1/3, and basically what happens here is whenever you summon a god, you draw a card. I personally don't know if a 1/3 is valuable enough for it to be included in the deck, because obviously, you want the minion to be good as well. I mean, Zeus's power as it is that you can draw a card. And there are other ways to draw cards, but this is definitely something you could put into a card draw deck if you were interested in finding very specific cards. I feel like that could work. Okay, we're going to try and speed up a little bit, because otherwise I'm going to be here all day. Okay, Valhalla's Sorcery. Forge a Norse item. I don't really like cards that give you random rewards. However, speaking of Norse items, Frenzy, you see here, is a Norse item. Also worth noting that last deck we got 3 uncommons. So, I mean, it's a 1 cost, But generally, I feel like, you know, cards that rely on randomness are not really worth having in your deck because, you know, there's an element of chance to it, whereas it may be better to just have the item that you want in your deck rather than the chance to forge it. Though you can forge something like Frenzy. All friendlies gain +2/+0 until the end of turn. And this is actually really good in the Norse Rush deck. So if you're trying to rush them down, if you can get to turn 4 and play this and you have a bunch of minions out, you know, them all getting +2/+0 then means they're all doing, you know, a lot more damage. And like, if you use this on, say, 3 units, that's already +6 damage across the board, which is, you know, quite a lot. Next we have Calder. Calder is a really good card combined with Skadi. I think Skadi is really strong. If you saw my Skadi Calder Wolves deck that I did previously, you'll understand why. Basically, it's a 2-cost 2/2 that when Skadi is about becomes a 2-cost 3/4. So a 3/4 basically when Skadi's around. Now Skadi's also a really strong card as well, and I think Calder is really good for this Norse Rush strategy that we were talking about. We also got Heavenly Agility, doubles the movement of a friendly. Usually I don't think this is that useful because the board isn't that big, and you generally don't, like, you generally shouldn't be positioning units so far away that you would need to be able to move them twice as far. But I'm sure there are some decks that this Greek card fits into. And Gem of Isolation, slow all enemies by 1. Again, I'm not convinced that, you know, a 2-cost slow, for example, is that useful when you also have stuff like Sunder, which is a 2-cost deal 2 damage. I mean, this does slow all enemies, but generally, like, I don't know, are you just buying yourself time there? I think there's better ways to buy yourself time than Gem of Isolation. Other kinds of crowd control or just damage. I mean, you know, you could play Gem of Isolation or you could play Calder. You know, like, this is kind of where you start to see the questioning the value of some cards. Okay, let's keep going. I mean, hopefully we'll start seeing some duplicates, and then it's kind of less to say, oh, look at this, Coerce and Fenrir. Fenrir, ability, gain +3/+3. Now, Fenrir, a lot of Norse decks are kind of rush decks. You're trying to kill the person, like, within 3-4 turns. So then Fenrir wouldn't see much play and wouldn't really be valuable in that sort of deck. However, he's a 3/4, which on the next turn you can turn into a 6/7, which is kind of disgusting. So if you're going for more of a late game Norse strategy, this is pretty nice. We then have Coerce, all friendly minions gain +1/+1. So we saw Frenzy, everything got, was it +2/0 for 1 turn? This is everything gets +1/+1. And this could work in a late game, you know, strategy when you've got stuff like Fenrir out, or it could work in a rush deck. It's a nice card. Calder, we've already talked about. Magma Slam, deal 3 damage to a non-leader enemy. This is a really good card for Egyptian control decks. Basically, it's a 2-cost 3 damage, right, to non-leader, which is perfect for early game or even late game when you're trying to clear, you know, some of these monsters. Like, for example, if you Magma Slam a Fenrir, and then you can auto-attack it with Ra or Isis, that's him dead. So that's why Magma Slam is really valuable for its cost. And Sprint. Okay, so this is our first rare card. We have a purple here. Allow an exhausted friendly to move and attack again. So basically, it gives you a second attack. And if you're going for like a late game Fenrir combo, for example, you get the Fenrir out, you get the 3/3 on him, you pop the Sprint, and you're dealing, what's that, 6 damage. He's a 6/7, so that would be 6 damage twice. Like, it can definitely get pretty nasty. It's a nice option. And if you can also, you know, play, what's it called, when they attack on the same turn as they're summoned. I forget what that's called. Some units can attack on the same turn as they're summoned. If you can pop that on Fenrir and then Sprint, like, well, actually you wouldn't be able to do all 3 because that's way too much mana. But you could definitely do some sort of synergy here with Sprint and a late game Norse deck. The problem there is just trying to get to late game. Okay, what's up next? Magma Slam, we've talked about. Valhalla's Sorcery, we've talked about. Dying Wish. Okay, kill a non-leader friendly and draw cards equal to its attack. So you kill one of your own units in order to draw cards equal to its attack. So, I don't know. I feel like there's better ways to draw cards in Norse, for example. So not Norse. For example, in Egyptian, you have other ways of drawing cards. This one requires sacrificing. So first you have to summon something, and then you have to sacrifice it. It just seems a bit of a convoluted way to draw cards. However, as the meta evolves, this could be very useful if you're looking for very specific cards, or, you know, just trying to have a deck that's very draw reliant. You could definitely have a combo with this card. Cataclysm, stun all enemies in the target area. I think Cataclysm is actually quite useful. It does a 2x2 area and then stuns unit. And stuns units don't retaliate, so if you stun a unit, you can then attack it without fearing retribution. And also they can't do anything until their next turn, so they also miss a turn. And Cataclysm is really nice with stuff like Anubis, which drops like an AoE on the floor, which if units are still standing in that on the next turn, take additional damage. So if you then Cataclysm them, so you use Anubis' ability and then stun the units, you know, they're guaranteed to take that extra damage, so it's not a bad card. And then Pardon we have talked about previously. Haven't seen any legendaries yet. Thanatos. People used to bitch about him. He has actually been nerfed. So Thanatos, travel to any non-leader enemy with 2 or less health and kill them. I think it used to be 3 or less health. I can't remember exactly what it was, but basically you would summon Thanatos, he would kill something, on his initiative, so he could do it on his turn. So you'd summon Thanatos, and then you would kill something. So it was basically like using, you know, like a Sunder or something and killing a unit, but then also having a Thanatos. Fortunately, that's been kind of toned down a little bit, so he's like less useful, but still, I think still a decent card in the Greek pantheon, because it does give you clear, and the thing is, it's enemies with 2 or less health. So if you can get a unit down to 2 or less health, you can then summon Thanatos and execute it and kill it. So, you know, there are options there, and it can travel to any unit on the board, so they don't even have to be nearby. And then you have a 3/2 unit, you know, in that spot instead. Next we have Thorns, increase a non-leader's friendly return damage by 2. So this is really good on taunt units. Thorns, basically what you're doing is whenever they get hit, return damage is the damage that you deal back. And taunted units, adjacent units have to target the taunted unit, so you can pop Thorns on something like an Athena, which has taunt, for example, and increase her return damage. And it's a very cheap card, so this is definitely a useful card in that sort of deck. Arachne, Greek. She is uncommon. At the end of your turn, spawn An 02? An 02? Maybe it must be An 02. I don't know, grammar. Anyway, 02 Spiderling. Ability give all Spiderlings taunt. So this is, you know, one of those taunt units that we were talking about that you could combine with Thorns. Yeah, Arachne, she's also a 4/5 herself. And so it's something you want to deal with, because if the board starts like getting covered in Spiderlings, they can also just body block. So you can't move through an enemy unit, so it's similar with Bastex Cats. You can actually use them just to form a wall and kind of block your opponent, and that's kind of what happens with Arachne. So I think she could definitely be useful in a god-focused Greek deck, which seems to be the case because, you know, the Greek have a lot of gods. Banish. Banish non-leader enemies in target area. So Banish we talked about with Freya. This card is a 4-cost Norse card that just allows you to do that in an area, so if you don't have Freya. The thing that I would say though is, like, you know, why would you run Banish when you could just run Freya, where this effect costs 2 mana? Admittedly, it's not in a target area. I don't know if this can hit multiple targets, but personally I would probably run Freya as my leader over Banish as a card, because then you can just banish whenever. You don't even need to draw this. And lastly, Divine Intervention. Draw 2 random gods from your deck. So, I mean, this is targeted draw. Targeted draw is always nice in card games, because if you're building a deck around very specific cards, this can help you find them. You know, if you only have 2 gods in your deck, Divine Intervention is going to help you find them. But ultimately, it's a waste of a slot in some ways, because, like, you know, if you have Divine Intervention, you're basically putting targeted draw in when, you know, you could have something else. You could have random draw, for example, and if you have enough gods, you know, random draw is useful. I don't know. Divine Intervention, not maybe the bestest of cards. Okay, moving on. Heavenly Agility, we've talked about. Magma Slam, we have talked about. Valhalla's Blessing. Add a random Norse card into your hand from your deck. It costs 1 less. This isn't a bad card. This is, like, especially for beginners who don't have a very big collection, you can basically put this in your deck. If you don't want to add anything else to your deck, Valhalla's Blessing kind of works, because it puts the cost of whatever you drop down by 1, and it costs 1. So if you want a very specific cards in your deck, and you don't want, like, maybe for example you have a strategy that only requires a few cards but will win you the game, Valhalla's Blessing basically is kind of used to take up space in your deck, but not actually counter space in your deck, if that makes sense. It's kind of hard to explain, but it definitely has some uses. Next we have Divine Intervention. Draw 2 random gods from your deck. We spoke about that earlier, and Cataclysm we spoke about earlier as well. Okay, so we've done 6 packs and we still haven't found a legendary. I've heard it takes 5 to 10 packs to get a legendary. We'll see. RGs we talked about. Sanctuary we talked about. And okay, there's my legendary, but I already have her. We talked about her as well. Ares, ability, pull an enemy to you and stun them. So Ares is a 7-cost 3/8. So already we can see that he's quite tough, so he's kind of hard to kill. Stun, I told you guys, you know, it stops retaliation damage. So you can use this to reposition enemies and stun them, basically. And stunning, I think, is quite useful because then they don't take retaliation damage. So you can Ares someone in and then use your other gods like Thanatos and Arachne and all that to then deal damage to them. So pretty good. Web of Word. Forge a Norse god. It gains +2 attack. So you're going to get a random god, but it's going to have +2 attack. This doesn't seem like a terrible card. I don't think it's that good for, you know, your early game rush Norse decks, but I think if you're doing maybe a later game Norse deck, this could be useful. If you get, especially if you get Skadi, actually. Okay, let's keep going. Let's keep going. I think a lot of these cards also, you know, if the meta shifts, will suddenly become useful. Like, none of these cards are downright terrible. Sanctuary we've talked about. Teleport friendly anywhere on the battlefield. This is actually not a bad card. You can, what you could do is summon a Athena, for example, buff her up with taunt, and then on the next turn teleport her in. Although actually her ability teleports her, so I don't know why you use teleport. Maybe like an Ares or something else. Not an Ares. Is Ares Greek? Yeah, he's Greek. And an Ares. Ares would work. But like it's not a terrible card. I think there's definitely going to be strategies later on that will employ teleport. This is the thing with a lot of these cards, though, is that there are going to be strategies that I think people will utilize with these cards, for example. So like even though they're not really meta at the moment, they could be later on. And that's kind of the beauty of tactics, is that a lot of the cards, although maybe aren't super seen now, will be used a lot in the future. Book of Thoth. Forge an Egyptian item and add an additional copy of it to your hand. So does that mean you get 2? I'm thinking that means you get 2, because it says additional copy. I mean, this depends on the Egyptian items. I can't think what they are off the top of my head. I don't know. I don't think it's really that good in a control deck, which is what Egypt is more or less playing at the moment. But it might have a home, I guess. Sterops, I don't even know, he's got one eye. Deal +1 attack to minions. So he does more damage to minions. So against a minion-centric deck, Steropes is kind of useful. But yeah, I don't know. He's just a general minion. A 2/4 for 3. It's not bad. I mean, he's got 4 health, so he's harder to kill, which means you're likely to get that extra damage. So yeah, he's all right. He's all right. Kind of average. Oh, we got 2 of him. This is, oh, if that had been another one, I would have just laughed. Like, if we just got, like, loads and loads of him. Serket. Poison a non-leader enemy. They die at the end of their next turn. I don't really rate Serket. Now, she's a 3/3, which is alright. You know, there's other 3/3s. I mean, you could have a Steropes instead who's a 2/4, for example. But then you don't get the ability. Ability, poison a non-leader. However, non-leader enemy and they die. However, there's a card called Last Breath, which costs 4. So 1 extra mana. And it poisons 2 enemies on that turn. So it does the same thing to 2 units, but it happens on that turn. Whereas Serket, because she doesn't have initiative, you have to summon Serket. Serket has to not die, and then you can use your ability. So it's like, I mean, would I rather have Serket or Last Breath? I'd rather have Last Breath. And Banish, we have covered. Okay, moving on. Geb, we've covered. Anhur. Nice, we'll just see what else is in here. Beacon of Hope, Deathbringer, and Banish we've covered. Okay, so Anhur is a 3/3 range god. His ability, deal 3 damage to an enemy and knock them back up to 2 tiles. And if they hit a wall, they will be stunned. I actually quite like Anhur. I think if you're doing a god-focused Egyptian deck, I know I've talked about a lot about control Egyptian, but if you're doing god-focused Egyptian, a 3/3 for full cost is really good, especially as his ability, you know, it deals 3 damage, and abilities don't take return damage. So it's a really kind of strong Egyptian card, to be honest. Along with the knockback, and if you can get the stun too, you know, that's really nice. Beacon of Hope, spawn a random Greek god. I don't know, I think 5 cost for a random god that could be something bad. I mean, I would rather just have the gods in my deck, that's what I would say. Deathbringer, double the base attack of a non-leader friendly, so you're doubling your base attack on a unit for 2 cost. Greek has a lot of strong units, and I think the 2 cost Deathbringer definitely has a home in a lot of decks. Moving on. Beacon of Hope we've just talked about. Heavenly Agility we've covered. Ares we've covered. Gem of Isolation we've covered. Sprint we've covered. Okay, just duplicates. I want to get another legendary. Surtur. Aura. Friendlies gain +1/0. Surtur is a good card. I actually think his aura is quite nice. And he's only 3 cost, so if you're doing, you know, a early game Norse deck, if you can get, you know, a bunch of those cheap spawn minions, for example, the 2 ranged archers or the 2 melee ones, if you then drop a Surtur next to them, you know, you're making them stronger, which helps with your rush deck, basically. Geb, we've talked about. Thorns, we've talked about. Thorns, we've still talked about. Beacon of Hope, we've talked about. Okay, moving on. Bastet. I like Bastet as an Egyptian card. She's a 3-cost 2/3. I mean, I think Anhur is better than her. We just talked about him. But the ability to deploy 3 cats, if you're on the level, for example, the jungle level with the bush, if you drop her in the bush so she doesn't die, on the next turn, you've got 3 1/1 cats with charge, so then you can move them that turn. And you can use them to kind of deploy a wall. So I think Bastet, if you don't kill her, it can get kind of out of hand with all these 1/1 cats. And that's why I think she's a fun card, just because you have to, like, your enemy then has to kill her because she's going to cause a lot of problems. Teleport, we've discussed. Frenzy, we have discussed. Valhalla's Blessing, we have discussed. And more Frenzy. Okay. Let's keep going, see what we get. Coerce, we've talked about. Magma Slam, we've talked about. Dying Wish. Kill a leader. We've talked about that, actually. Valhalla's Sorcery, we've talked about. And Geb, we've talked about. Right, come on. Come on. I want at least 2 more legendaries, else I'm going to be salty. Magma Slam. We have talked about Searcher, we've talked about Calder, we've talked about Fenrir, we've talked about Sanctuary, we've talked about... Ugh. Web of Word, we've talked about Shell. Give all friendlies in target area shield 1 until your next turn. So all friendlies in the area will take shield 1. Shield 1 basically means that they take 1 reduced damage. So if something's a 1/1 and it attacks them, they'll take no damage. If something's a 2/1, they'll take 1 damage. If it's a 3, they'll take... You get the idea. It's not a bad card. It's not a bad card at all. If you're trying to kind of protect things against certain things, like it's nice to have a little bit of protection in there. Though generally I think decks typically are more aggressive than defensive. Sometimes having a few defensive cards can really be nice. Stereops. Steropes. Why does this not have my new card back now that I think about it? Deals +1 attack to minions. We've talked about him. And Frenzy we've talked about. Let's keep going. Beacon of Hope, we've talked about. Calder, we've talked about. Coerce, we've talked about. Geb, we've talked about. I've got so many Gebs. Appeasement, here we go, here's a new card. Kill a non-leader friendly and reduce the cost of your cards in hand by 2. I think, like, with a... what's it called? Clear deck. Control deck. So Control Egyptian deck. This is a really good card. You not only do you kill something, you also reduce the cost of the cards in your hand, I think it is, by 2. Yeah, of your cards, yeah. So that just seems really good for 3 costs. That seems really, really strong. And definitely something you could easily slot into a deck. Right, what's next? Arachne, we've discussed. Steropes, Arachne. I've got 3 Arachnes now. Teleport, Temporal Beads. Refresh the cooldowns of all friendly gods. So this is a 3... Is this a legendary? Hey, look at that. We got another legendary. I did not realize. I was going to say, this is quite a strong card. And then I realized it's got the Golden Border. So basically, you pay 3 and all of your gods get refreshed cooldowns for their abilities, which I actually think could be quite good. You know, like, this is a neutral card, so you can do it with any pantheon. So, like, with Anhur, you could have that attack twice. With Geb, you could, you know, put the +3 damage, not defense, sorry, damage, +3 health on things twice. With Bastet, you could have twice the cats. With Athena, you could teleport twice. Like, with Sol, you could do her damage twice. With Loki, you could do his ambush twice. Like, this is a pretty strong card if you have a god-centric deck, and I could definitely see it played, especially in Greek pantheons. In Greek decks, because Greek is very kind of god-focused. Divine Intervention, we have talked about. Ritual Tribute. Spawn a random god from your grave. It gains +2/+2. This is a nice card. I kind of like this idea, although you do have to have gods in your grave. So this is only gods that you've played, so you've had to have a god that's then died in order for this to use. But +2/+2 is like nothing to turn your nose up at, and this is maybe the kind of card that you would see played either in a god-centric Egyptian deck or potentially in a control deck later on as a win condition. So, you know, after you've cleared all of their cards, you know, there's certain ways you want to get win conditions. There are much better win conditions out there, like Book of the Dead, but Ritual Tribute is not too bad. RG's, Calder, and Thorns. Okay, let's keep going. See where we end up. Calder again, Teleport again, Fenrir again, Calder again. I think I've got about 8 million Calders at this point. Lots and lots of Calders. Is it getting colder in here, or is it just me? Oh, I'm sorry, you guys. It's pretty bad. Ares, Sanctuary, and Valhalla Sorcery. So you can see, like, 25 packs, you're going to get a lot of duplicates. But then you can start saving up that Canopic Dust for, you know, those last few legendaries that you might want. Rod of Tahuti, we've talked about. Divine Intervention, we've talked about. And Rod of Tahuti, actually, with that last card, which we just got, the one that resurrects a god from the grave, if you then pop this on it, it's gotten +2/+2 from its resurrection, and then +2 from Rod of Tahuti. So then it was, what, like +4/+2, which is quite a lot of damage. Kepri, here's a new one. Give all friendlies +1/+0 and all enemies -1/-0 in the target area until your next turn. So this gives a bunch of units +1, +0, and -1, -0. He's also a 1/8, so he's pretty tanky. So if you stick Taunt on him, for example, I don't know if there's a card that gives Taunt. Actually, now that I think about it, there might not be. But if there was, that would be disgusting. Yeah, he's alright. It's alright. It's not, I mean, it's not very offensive. It's much more of a kind of defensive card. It's something you definitely summon for his ability. And then I guess you could use the beads to cast it twice. If you cast it twice, would then all of your friendlies get +2, and all of the enemies would get -2? Ooh, that could be, that actually, so then all of the units, your unit scenario would get +2 damage, and all the enemies would get -2 damage. Huh. There's definitely some synergies that could happen there. Ares and Arachne. Okay, let's keep going. Web of Word, Gem of Isolation, Surtur, Heavenly Agility, Valhalla's Blessing. It's kind of getting a little bit predictable now, you guys. It's getting a little bit repetitious. Calder, Ares, Fenrir, Teleport, and Divine Intervention. I want one of those double legendary packs. Come on, let's get lucky. Let's get lucky. Gem of Isolation, Thorns, Magma Slam, Arachne, and Starcat. So there we go. That is our last pack. Although we do have enough. Should we buy one? Let's buy one more. Why not? Let's buy one more. One more pack. Purchase. Purchase. Open packs. Here we go. Come on. There we go. Come on. Let's get lucky. Web of Word, Valhalla Sorcery, Pardon, Ares, and Ritual Tribute. So in 25 packs we got 2 legendaries, which isn't great, but we did get a lot of then duplicates. I got a second Ritual Tribute actually, so that's nice. Which we can then, you know, maybe use to forge some of the cards that we need. So all in all, that's kind of what packs are like. We've talked about the merits of a few, you know, just different cards there. And let me know what you thought of this kind of style of video, guys. Like whether you want more kind of tactics focused discussive videos, or whether you prefer deck guides. But yeah, that's kind of it. I've got to go disenchant a lot of cards, which is going to take forever for the record, because you have to so you have to right click them, and then you have to press disenchant, and then yes, and then dismiss, and then disenchant, and then this, and then there was a problem with your request. Come on, you can do it. You can do it. Hey, there we go. So it's a bit slow. It's a bit slow. But yeah, that's been more or less it for this pack opening and tactics discussion. Let me know if you agree or disagree with anything I've said about the cards that we've crafted. I mean, you know, maybe you have a really, really good teleport deck, for example. And if you want to see anything specific in our next deck video, you know, let us know, or let me know, sorry, in the comments below. That's about it. You know, beyond that, you know, if you've enjoyed this video and you want to see more card gaming action, you can always subscribe to the channel. And if you want to catch me live streaming card games, I have a Twitch, twitch.tv/Jaggerous, and I'm on Twitter @Jaggerous. Basically, I'm Jaggerous, like, literally everywhere, so if you want to stalk me, feel free. But yeah, let me know what you thought in the comments below. Maybe slam that thumbs up button, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Maybe subscribe. Bye!